Good evening and welcome to TDM Talk Show. The health of the ocean is under constant threat from human consumption and development. The Pearl River Delta region is no exception. The Ocean Recovery Alliance is a charitable organisation in Hong Kong which is working to improve the ocean environment in the region. Joining me on the program is Doug Woodring. He is the founder of the Ocean Recovery Alliance and he's working on several projects and initiatives to raise awareness among consumers and businesses. Welcome, Doug. Thanks for coming to Macau to join me on the talk show.
Thank you, Emma. Thanks for having me.
Now tell me about your organisation.
So we're a non-profit organization registered in Hong Kong and also California. We mainly have focused around plastic pollution issues, although we care about overfishing, reef protection, overfishing of sharks and animals that are under threat. But plastic is one of those things that the whole world has an issue with, has a problem with, and it all comes from land. So in a way it's a land issue, but the ocean is the end recipient of some of the work we're doing.
So why is plastic then your biggest concern?
So about 4 or 5 years ago, we did an expedition to the middle of the North Pacific, which you might have heard of, the garbage patch, which they call it, the North Pacific Gyre, which is about 1,000 miles from land, from California or from Hawaii. It is not a big island that you can walk across, but we did find plastic every single step of the way that we went. And the area there is about 1 million square miles. It's about 1,000 times more than Hong Kong, and 4 or 5 times that of Japan. And what happens is plastic just does not biodegrade easily. And so when you look at this material versus paper, metals, glass, which can degrade in an environment and also be readily recycled, plastic is one of those things that we think of as very disposable. It's lightweight, doesn't have value. I put it on the ground, someone will hopefully pick it up. But unfortunately, when it doesn't get picked up and it doesn't go into the right place, it won't go away. So every single piece of plastic ever made still exists today, unless it was burned.
Right.
And that causes a whole different problem. When you burn something in an open pit, which a lot of countries in Asia do just to get rid of the garbage, the toxins go into the air, the rain comes, and then that takes the toxins back into the water for the animals to have to deal with, which eventually comes back to us, potentially.
Yeah, so it's not just the plastic that sort of clusters together in the ocean, it's the effect of burning it as well.
That can be one of the problems. So obviously when you have plastic on beaches, that's not good for tourism, it's not good for the fishing industry, it's not good for the local health of the community. Waterways, huge amount of the plastic that gets into the water comes from river systems. Most countries simply cannot keep pace with the consumption patterns of the population versus the waste management and recycling infrastructure of those countries. Even Hong Kong now, one of the richest cities in the world, we have only been using landfill as our way to get rid of trash in the last many decades, and now we're finally realizing the landfills are full or they're filling up quickly. Where do we put this stuff? But for a lot of countries, they don't even have the landfill. It goes into the river, that pollutes the water, they can't wash, there's disease, and there's all kind of impacts that come from trash or no trash. And therefore, focusing on this plastic, which is really the toughest piece of the trash puzzle to fix, is what we're trying to conquer. And it is a tough problem, but it's also one that's achievable.
Okay, so what impact have you seen then on marine life in what you've done so far?
So we, the one thing I like to say, it's not a nice saying, but in the ocean there's no body count. And when plastic got propagated into our lives through much better production and cheaper materials, easier to mold it, huge amount of it comes from this part of the world. We want cheaper, cheaper, cheaper. We want durable things, but once we're done with them, we just want to throw them away. Where do we throw them? Well, no one has this recycling. Unfortunately, all types of animals are proven and shown to have been impacted by plastic. We just don't know how many might have died in the ocean because we can't see it.
Right.
So when whales have washed up in the last few years in the Mediterranean, in California, and Australia, it used to be that we bury the whales because they smell bad, get them away from humanity, and we don't look inside them. But recently, people have been looking inside the whales, and they found tens to hundreds of kilos of plastic.
Wow.
So at the big end of the animal spectrum, animals can get maimed or harmed, physically damaged by plastic. It could be something around their neck, might be something that gets in their stomach they can't digest and it hurts them. When we were on our expedition in the middle of the ocean, we found a very sturdy, thick piece of plastic. Most of the debris floating around there has animal life on it, little crabs and eggs and barnacles. So we thought this was a barnacle. When we got back to shore, we pulled this thing out and we thought it was a tooth. Well, it turned out it was the bill of a marlin. Oh. And so the swordfish had mistaken this thing floating on the top as maybe a tuna or a piece of fish, a wahoo, and tried to stab it.
And it got stuck.
And it broke the tip of its bill.
Ah.
So even the top of the food chain can mistake this as a problem, all the way down to the small animals, jellyfish and little fish that we'll be eating, and they're the ones who might get more of a chemical impact with the toxins that are in the water on the plastic that can get into the skin.
Right, so it's not only what we see that's washed up on the shore or what's sort of floating around on the surface, it can go quite deep.
That's correct. In fact, 2/3 roughly of all plastic made actually sinks. It is not buoyant. If you take a plastic bottle and you don't put the top on, there's no air in it, the bottle will sink.
Right.
So just imagine how many pieces of plastic that come out of rivers and things, or that maybe get over the side into the water and they go to the bottom, then all of a sudden we can't see them and that impact on our beach and say, oh, we have a big problem. They've just recently taken submersible, unmanned, high-resolution video cameras 4,000 meters into the bottom of the ocean and going across the bottom, and all they've seen is trash. That's and that, incredible. To me, is one of the most shocking videos ever, because we never will see that. In that area, very high pressure, very low temperature, very low microbes, that material will never go away. So people will say, well, does that harm us? Well, first of all, it's not natural. It's not meant to be there. Maybe that piece at the bottom won't harm you and me today, but none of us can predict what might be happening to the ecosystem in the future with that.
Right. So, for example, the seafood that we buy then in the market, you know, it's very popular here to go to the market to get fresh seafood. Is that affected by what you were just talking about? Well,
it could be. You know, what we have to do is step back and say, what are we putting in the water, period? If it's not the plastic, it could either be there's plenty of other pollutants that are coming out of the bilge water from ships when they change the bilge water from the factories upstream. So it's very hard to tell when your fish that you've eaten, where he got infected, where he got impacted. There is a difference, though, with plastic in the ocean compared to land-based garbage, is that plastic acts as a magnet for toxins. The toxins, the heavy metals, the DDTs and PCBs and fire retardants and pesticides sit on the top of the water. They don't like it. It's like oil and water. And when they find a little piece of plastic, which is petroleum-based, they grab it, and they like that. But then when a little fish comes along and thinks that it's a fish food, the fatty tissue of that fish is much more interesting for the toxins to go into and easier to absorb into than the plastic. So that's where there's a transfer. Okay. And it might not be the plastic that kills the fish, because it could go through. Right. But now all of a sudden he got toxified with a little bit of stuff, which won't go away. Yeah. And as that magnifies over that fish's life, again, whether it's from that point or that point or that point, that is something we should be thinking about. And therefore, when you hear that you shouldn't eat too much tuna, every week because there's a lot of mercury in that. The tuna are at the top of the food chain, and they eat everything along the way. And that accumulates up to the tissue of the tuna, which then has a high, per capita amount of that toxin in the top of the food chain. If you look at some of the Eskimos up in the Arctic who never eat processed food, they never eat anything made in a factory, they have some of the highest toxicity of any human in the world.
Right, because they're catching the
Because they're
fish.
eating everything at the top of the food chain.
Right, okay. So what are some other examples about how it affects our health? I mean, a lot of people say in Hong Kong and even Macau, we go swimming in these waters. Is there anything we've got to look out for?
Well, we have the sewage treatment in this part of the world is not the best, even though we're fairly wealthy in Hong Kong. The amount of the level that we treat the sewage is not as high as it is in many, many other countries. When you have sewage and pollution that comes out of the ships or out of the rivers, and then warm temperatures, which we get in this part of the world, that creates bacteria, algae growth. So we get red tides sometimes.
We see that in Macau.
And we see that in Macau, that then kills the fish and there's oxygen comes out of the water. So plastic is one of those things which doesn't necessarily cause that, but when you have, it's sort of like the scenario in New York when they figured out that if you paint all the windows of the old buildings and you fix the glass and you create an area that is clean, then vandalism doesn't start happening again.
Okay.
And if we have a dirty scenario to begin with, people don't have the incentive to keep it getting clean. So we've got to somehow get over that barrier, clean it, and then everyone can appreciate what we've just done. Now, Hong Kong has just last year banned trolling in all of Hong Kong waters, bottom trolling from fishing.
Okay.
And that is a huge development because it really gives the ocean a chance to regrow and come back, and the filter feeders can come. And I personally think this is going to be a new chapter in the ocean rejuvenation, because there will be some chance for the wildlife to come back. And then hopefully we can start thinking about the other stuff we're putting in, which is the plastic and the other not so good things.
Right. Well, now I'd like to talk about plastic bottles, bottled water, for example. I mean, in Macau and I guess Hong Kong as well, the water is safe to drink out of the tap, right? But many people just choose to buy water bottles. What's your take on this?
Well, I think it's psychological and marketing. In the past, in the 60s, the water was not good, and so people thought that you need to boil it and it's not safe. And unfortunately, the people who grew up in that generation, I believe, just have kept that mindset that it's not good. And they grew up, and then they tell their kids, and they say you shouldn't be drinking this water when in fact you can. And therefore, they go out and they buy the stuff in the plastic disposable. And then at the same time, you're hearing, for health reasons, drink water, drink water, drink water, have your 8 glasses a day, and people think you've got to have water around you all the time, which you really don't. One of the big problems, which a lot of people don't realize, and they drink a huge amount of in Hong Kong, is distilled water. It's actually not good for you.
Right. It's got to be
especially
mineralized,
when you're
right?
doing athletic and it's hot. But people think that that was created because it was the cheapest way just to purify something at that time when people needed purified water. But it is not good for you. So now we have people drinking stuff that's not good for you, technically, probably worse than the tap water.
Right.
And it's coming in garbage or plastic. Garbage if it's not turned into a resource and recycled, which a lot of it is not done. There was a study that showed that about 50% of all the bottled water in Hong Kong doesn't get drunk because people, the water gets too hot, they're not thirsty anymore, they leave it on their desk, they forget about it. So imagine the amount of water we're using, not only to just make it, but to then buy it, not use it, and then have a piece of plastic there to dispose of, which will last forever unless we recycle it and put it into the right stream.
Yeah, a lot of waste.
A lot of waste.
And I guess another thing too, in both Hong Kong and Macau, it's that takeaway food culture. It's very easy to go to the Chinese takeaway shop and get all of your containers and things like that. this is also a concern. How can we tackle that issue?
Right. Well, in New York, they've just decided to ban styrofoam, which is a great thing. There's plenty of new technologies out there with food services that could replace the styrofoam. Styrofoam is really not a great thing. It's not good if you microwave it and your food is in there, not good for your health. But it's also not good for the ocean. It's very, very lightweight. Technically, it can be recycled, but it's so lightweight, no one wants to go out and, grab it all and capture it and take it to be recycled. So we just buy it and dispose, and it's light, it flies away, it gets out of the system, and that's what ends up on a lot of our shorelines. It's a chicken and egg scenario. People say, well, the new material that is made from fiber, or it's made from recycled content of some sort, costs too much, and so we can't afford to buy that for my restaurant. Well, if everyone is buying that material, the price will go down, and this is where law and legislation needs to come in. If there's a level playing field and everyone is using the same thing, then there's no disadvantage to anyone, and this is where the leadership needs to come from governments around the world, and realizing that those kind of changes will benefit their communities and their own waste management infrastructure, and the demands on that's being placed by this free-for-all in trying to make a profit on the last little cent by using material that's not good for us at the end of the day.
Okay. Now, I'd like to talk about the neighbouring Guangdong province now, and the fact that there are, I guess, several rivers that sort of flow into the Delta region. What is the impact, if you could talk a bit about that aspect?
Well, in the sense of plastic, for what we're doing, we refer to rivers as arteries, and the arteries go to the heart, and the heart is the ocean. If you think of plastic as the cholesterol, we want to block the cholesterol from getting to the heart. How do we do that? It's much easier to capture and catch the outflow of material from rivers and streams because they're a confined space going one direction than if you've got plastics out in the middle of the ocean floating around and now sunk. And so one of the programs we're working on is a global mapping system to link all the world's rivers and ocean together using community reporting and phones to take photos of trash hotspots, so that people in the watershed areas, stakeholders, whether it's an NGO, a university, a Rotary Club, a business, a tourism director, a mayor, can say, oh my gosh, now I see on the map where all these hotspots are along the river where that trash is. We should clean that up, and we should put up a boom and a net and a catchment device, at least stop that flow of the cholesterol into the ocean. Okay. So when you have big deltas like the Pearl River Delta and floods and big rains, which we do in this part of the world, anything that's lightweight, which is plastic or styrofoam, comes right up with the water and out it goes when there's the big flush. And that's what we're faced with in this part of the world. Right. And Hong Kong gets the negative benefit of that when the winds blow and it comes up on our seashore and coastline. So it's a challenge, but I think if we start to think about this in a different way and focusing on the solid waste that we can all see and a child can see and know that it's not meant to be there, say, Mom, let's get that out. Let's stop this. That's something we can fix. When you talk to the children about climate change, it's a very different thing because you don't really know what 10% reduction in emissions means to your daily life or my daily life. And
so simple actions.
In that kind of sense, I think this is a very achievable but huge task.
Okay, yeah, so now we're talking about solutions. I guess you think it's a matter of educating consumers and businesses as well? Yeah,
so it's, unfortunately, a lot of time I feel that the nonprofit community and the consumers have been put some of too much weight on their shoulders in terms of reducing this problem. It is us, the consumer, who uses things, but it's also the government who doesn't provide the right infrastructure to collect, and it's also the companies who are not playing the right role in looking after their brand and their product that they give out to you and me. It's not very good to have a piece of garbage branded with your name on it. And so when you start thinking about this material as a resource, plastic, pound for pound, is more valuable than steel. The problem is that it's completely disaggregated once it goes into all of our households, and no one wants to pay the money or the expense to re-aggregate it to get it back into the system for recycling. And that is the super challenge. It's a bit like the opposite of the telecom industry, when the challenge was to get you the high performance fiber to your own phone and your own handset so that you can get video and advertising. The telcos were willing to pay the final mile to you. But for recycling, it's the opposite. It's the first mile. That's the very difficult part. And no one's been willing, because there's no telcos out there, to pay the fee or the cost to get it from you and me back to the system.
Right.
And so the companies that start to do that, using reverse supply chain, using bring back programs that say, if you buy this and you bring it back to my shop, I'll give you 10 of these, I'll give you a free one. That gets you back in the store. It's proven that it's cheaper than advertising in magazines and billboards to do a bring back program and get that material back. If you can do that, then the people who know how to use it will come along and say, yeah, I will bring my truck and I'll take it and I'll do my recycling. That's the challenge that we need to fix, and we all have to play that game. We all have to be part of that team, not just the consumer.
All right, so it's both sides. Okay. Going back to the projects that you're working on, one of them has to do with the connection between drains and the ocean. Can you tell me about that?
Right, so we're about to start a project called the Great Art Project, and GRATE is spelled G-R-A-T-E because it's built around storm drains, which are grates that sit on the sidewalks. And everything that goes into those drains, of course, there are some filters and things, but a lot of the oil and the greases and the cigarette butts and the small material, when the big rain comes, goes out into the ocean. And so this is a very, what we're doing is putting little art plaques on the, just the side of the road near the drains. They do this in California and Australia, some other countries, just to remind people, don't dump in the drain, because if you dump in the drain, it can go to the ocean, because the ocean is downstream to everything. And so we want to start this in the southern part of Hong Kong, and then hopefully it will propagate into other districts, and we hope to actually have other countries around the world and cities around the world take this idea, because it's really just about creative street art to remind people not to dump in that drain, because the drain will go somewhere else into the water.
Okay. And I understand that our TDM English News Service spoke to you and a swimmer, Simon Holliday, who actually did a swim in May all the way from Hong Kong to Macau. And that was for a charity and to raise awareness about the ocean. So how did that go since we spoke to you?
Oh, it was incredible. It was May 24th, and he set a record, 10 hours, 20 minutes, and 30 seconds from Hong Kong to Macau. We got lucky with the weather, and we also had 1 hour with about 30 pink dolphins swimming around us. It was almost as if they said, thank you for your help with the ocean. It was incredible.
A bit of a cheer squad, maybe.
It was
keep
a cheer
going.
squad. It was leading the way. So he helped raise money for over 200,000 Hong Kong dollars for this great art project and ocean awareness. And it was really good, because we got a lot of very good support from the community, social media. Everyone's watching online, watching the tracking of where the currents are taking them and where the ships are coming. We had some great sponsors. The Cotai Ferry from Macau was one of the sponsors, and Otterbox and Lifeproof. And these kind of companies are the ones that I think see in the community that there's value to give back to things that the community wants and likes, and the environment. And in a stressed city environment like Hong Kong and Macau and China, where there's a lot of people and the children don't get so much time to be outdoors. They don't get experience to touch things and touch the dirt and see the little creatures in the water. Then they don't appreciate it and can't help it. And so, you know, there's something called shifting baselines. And when we grew up, we're used to seeing clear skies and all of the wildlife and everything. And now that's not there the way it used to be. But with the people who grow up in this new era, they think this is the norm.
Right.
And so they don't think it's any problem. And we shift and shift and shift, and we're going downwards the whole time. And so these kind of programs, I think, really can bring back inspiration for people to do things that can make a difference, to challenge themselves, to create teamwork around solving things and getting having companies be part of that solution at the same time. It was great.
Okay. Well, just to finish off, sort of to bring things here, for example, in Macau, talking about the cost of waste. I mean, Macau's development over the next few years, we're going to see a lot of changes, a lot more casinos, a lot more people working here, more infrastructure. This means more people, more waste. What can be done to sort of alleviate the pressure on the surrounding waters here, do you think?
Well, the main thing is much better waste management and focus on waste as a resource, not as a bad thing. All types of waste can be used to make money and have value. It's just a matter of aggregating them and processing them the right way. If Macau doesn't have that, China will have it across the border. So we just need to make it feasible so that we collect it in the right way here and we get it to the right step across the border, whether it's organics that can be used for fertilizer, whether it's gasification that can be used to create energy, of course for recycling. So when you think of all of the casinos and the bottles and the PET and the plastic, all of that is valuable. We just got to remember not to just throw it in the black plastic bags that someone carries away and puts in the basement, and then no one can figure out what is in those bags and where the good parts are that need to go to there, and there to be sold. If we hone in on that, there will always be waste, but there doesn't need to be waste going out. That can be turned into a resource and put back into the system somehow. And I think Macau can really reduce. Now, of course, they incinerate a lot of the garbage here.
Yes.
That is a bit of a challenge if you're trying to capture the good stuff and make more of a resource. Incineration is probably the bottom of the totem pole in terms of value creation from garbage to make some electricity. If you separate things before that and take them into their right paths of pure material, the value is much higher. So it depends if Macau wants to capture that value.
All right, so just develop a better system to,
Yeah, and focus on it in a different way instead of just thinking about get it out, get it out, get it away.
Okay.
A lot of opportunities from this for entrepreneurs and companies to do well. So we hope some of them can join us in this effort. Because if Macau makes a good example, many other cities around the world can say, wow, look what this big growing city just did.
Okay, well, thank you, Doug, for your insight, and thanks again for coming to Macau to join me on the program.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, well, for those of you at home, thanks for watching, and we'll be back next week with another special guest. Good night.